Chapter 33, Section 5, A Campaign in Birmingham. In the early 1960s, Birmingham, Alabama was a steel mill town with a long history of bigotry. Martin Luther King Jr. called it the most segregated city in the country. As a result, the SCLC decided to focus its attention there in 1963. Taking aim at the nation's most segregated city, Black residents of Birmingham experienced segregation in nearly every aspect of public life. Virtually no public facility in Birmingham allowed blacks and whites to mix. Furthermore, Birmingham had a history of racist violence. Between 1956 and 1963, there were 18 unsolved bombings in black neighborhoods. The violence not only targeted African Americans. In 1960, the New York Times reported attempts to explode dynamite at 2 Jewish synagogues as well. The SCLC stepped directly into this violent climate in the spring of 1963. King and the SCLC joined forces with local Birmingham activists, led by Reverend Fred L. Shuttlesworth. Together, they carefully planned a series of nonviolent actions against segregation. King advocates nonviolence in A Letter from Birmingham Jail. The protests began on April 3rd with lunch counter sit-ins, followed by street demonstrations. 30 protesters were arrested for marching at Birmingham City Hall without a permit. As leader of the Birmingham campaign, King decided the protests and arrests must continue. With little money to post bail, King realized that he would most likely go to jail and stay there for a while. On April 12th, King and 50 others demonstrated and were quickly arrested. While King was in jail, many members of Birmingham's white clergy took out an ad in a local newspaper criticizing King's tactics. "We recognize the natural impatience of people who feel that their hopes are slow in being realized," the ad said, "but we are convinced that these demonstrations are unwise and untimely." Instead, the clergy urged African Americans to abide by the law and negotiate with whites to achieve integration. King disagreed. While he waited in jail, he wrote a response to the ad. In Letter from a Birmingham Jail, King explained why African Americans were using civil disobedience and other forms of direct action to protest segregation. The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust, he wrote. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Concerning the charge that protesters were being impatient, King wrote, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well-timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see that justice too long delayed is justice denied." Martin Luther King Jr., Letter from a Birmingham Jail, April 16, 1963. The nation watches in horror. By late April, Birmingham's black leaders realized their protests were running out of steam. Few members of the black community were willing to carry out more direct action at the risk of going to jail. So the SCLC decided to turn to children. Although the decision was controversial, King argued that the children who took part in the demonstrations would develop a sense of their own stake in freedom and justice. On May 2, 1963, more than 1,000 African American youths marched from Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church into the city center. The city's public safety commissioner, Bull Connor, had most of them arrested. On May 3rd, more students gathered at the church, preparing to march again. This time, Connor ordered the police to barricade them in. When some students tried to leave, the police used attack dogs and high-pressure fire hoses on them. News photographers captured scenes of peaceful protesters being knocked down by blasts of water or attacked by snarling dogs. The images in newspapers and on television shocked Americans, many of whom had never imagined that Southerners would go to such brutal lengths to maintain segregation. The protests and the national attention they attracted marked a turning point. At the urging of local business leaders, the city stepped back from confrontation, and on May 10th, civil rights leaders announced a historic accord in Birmingham. Their agreement with the city called for a number of changes, including the desegregation of public facilities within 90 days. King called the deal the most magnificent victory for justice we've seen in the Deep South. A racist backlash soon followed, however. The Ku Klux Klan held a rally, and bombs later went off at a motel where black leaders had been staying. In response, President Kennedy sent federal troops to a nearby military base, promising to deploy them if necessary to keep the peace. Birmingham remained calm for several months after that, but then another violent attack occurred. On September 15th, during Sunday services, a bomb exploded at the 16th Street Baptist Church, killing 4 African-American girls. Reverend King later spoke at their funeral, calling them the martyred heroines of a holy crusade for freedom and human dignity.